Start. Hey all, this is Sakthisree, and with me I have my team Niegil, Vishnu, and Rishabh. As part of our A1C1 course project, we're looking into using data to figure out what a country's secret to happiness is. Moving ahead. So as an introduction, we use the World Happiness Report dataset, and the problem statement that we got out of it is, just to give a background on the World Happiness Report dataset, it's a landmark survey of the state of global happiness that ranks 150 countries by how happy their citizens perceive themselves to be. So this happiness score is a national average of these responses. So using the factors in this happiness score survey, we wanted to answer the question, what makes us happy? In order to answer that, we divided our project into 5 parts. The first part being analyzing and understanding what factors actually affect the happiness index score. The part B being analyzing and understanding the relationship between terror attacks and happiness. Part C being creating a model to predict the happiness index of a country. And for part D, as you'll see in the coming slides, health becomes one of the major factors that affects the happiness index score of countries. So considering that particular observation, we wanted to tie it to our current scenario of the pandemic of COVID-19. And to do that, we used the COVID-19 dataset in order to build a forecasting model. And in part E, using the forecasting model, we created a dashboard for viewing the forecasts in a better way.
So we actually used 3 different data sets. The first one was the global terrorism database. The second one was the World Happiness dataset. And the third one was the World COVID-19 database. So we used a basic pre-processing and normal pipeline that we usually use. It started with a pre-processing where we actually clean our data set. The second part had a EDA, which actually looked into the world happiness data set in order to check the relation between the different predictors. The next part actually combined the global terrorism database and the world happiness data set. And again, we saw the data and how it was related. After this, we performed a model creation. That is, we used a MLP regressor and a lasso regression to predict our happiness index. And after this, we actually used the FP profit, which was used to forecast the COVID-19 cases, deaths, and so on. Next slide.
So the algorithms used in our approach are lasso polynomial regression, that is essentially an L1 regularization method. There is a multi-layer perceptron regression, that is a generic feed-forward neural network. And lastly, we use something known as FB profit, that is a time series forecasting Python library by Facebook that essentially helps us to encode the non-linear regression with seasonality and fit it into our data. It's an sklearn-like API. Next.
These are the 3 datasets that we use for our project. The first one being the World Happiness dataset, which contains information corresponding to each country like GDP per capita, health, freedom, and happiness index, etc. The second one being the Global Terrorism database, which is a publicly available database provided by the University of Maryland. It contains 135 columns. We have utilized only the information between 2015 and 2018. Next comes the World COVID-19 database, which is directly taken from our World in Data website, where it is updated daily and includes data on confirmed cases, deaths, and testing, etc.
This is a look into some of the basic packages that we use. As you can see, some of it is very mandatory for our ML work. New ones include FB Profit, Bubbly, and Plotly. Moving ahead. So now looking into the results. So for part A, when we analyzed to understand which factors affect the happiness index score of countries, we came to realize that health, GDP per capita, and freedom were the top 3 factors, with generosity being the least contributing factor. This seemed pretty obvious since most of the European countries are high in GDP and hence were also high in their happiness index score as compared to African countries.
This is a heat map that depicts the correlation between the columns of a modified database, where now it consists of number of terror attacks per country as a column. As we can see, as we can infer from this, there is not much of a good correlation between terror attacks and happiness score, which may be because of There are other factors that are affecting the happiness index. Like there are countries like Syria and Palestine are in critical war zone, which could make their living conditions poor and hence affecting the happiness index. And then we made a model to predict happiness index of a country. We tried out different models for this, like linear regression, KNN, lasso, ridge, etc. Lasso with polynomial feature turned out to be the best model for this, as it gave out an R2 score of 0.82, which is a pretty good score.
Finally, let's talk about COVID, the factor that's making everyone unhappy, certainly. So, this COVID forecasting problem that we pose here, we just need to predict the number of cases or number of total deaths, any predictions we can make by looking at the previous historical data. So, this is the problem of time series forecasting. So, we could have gone with the sequential models like LSTM and stuff, but those have a high training requirement. So, we went ahead with something called as FB Profit, which is an easy to use sklearn library. Now in FP Profit, we essentially require two variables. One is the dates and other is the column for which we need to make future predictions. And based on that, basically, we perform some cross validation as well for the n minus 30 days, where n is the last date of the training set. And basically, we get a metric such as MSE, RMSE, and mean absolute percentage error, which is plotted on the right. So based on these parameters, we make some predictions. Yep, next.
After this, we actually made a dashboard which can be accessed from anywhere. And it takes three inputs, that is the country or the region, and the forecast period, the number of days we want to predict or forecast, and the number of new cases or deaths, or there are a few options there. So this dashboard actually provides a visual analysis of what we said so far. Next slide. So in conclusion, the data factors that were used for calculating is not calculating the happiness index is not holistic and inclusive. There are other factors that also can be considered, and we can see that the GDP is the predictor that seems to be skewed, and it's highly likely to bias our happiness score. We did not find much of a correlation between terror attacks and happiness index, and this might be because we are not taking in the factors that actually affect terror attacks. And finally, for COVID-19 forecast, we performed univariate analysis on historical data. So this actually just tries to capture the trend, and we can actually move forward to multi-variate analysis and seeing this to be one of our main predictors, but other predictors which might help improve our model. Next slide.
Yeah. So as our last slide, some of the improvements that can be done, that we believe can be done is, first of all, for having a more inclusive happiness index of a country, one that's more accurate, we believe it's important to add more factors other than the 6 that's being used right now. The second improvement is to move into using NLP and decision trees for analyzing terrorism data, because we've seen a lot of columns in it which contain text data, and the best way to analyze text data would be using NLP. Third, we would like to move into multivariate analysis for forecasting COVID-19, since we've only used historical data right now. And as much as it's important to have historical data, we also know that there are many external factors and other variables that can influence a country's COVID-19 cases. And yes, thank you.